Back in January, shortly after its release, I brought to you my review of my experience with Monster Hunter World as a first-time Monster Hunter. It was the first game in the franchise that I seriously sunk my teeth into, and I came away genuinely impressed with what it had to offer. Many months on, and all of that remains true. This is still a game that I absolutely love, that I adore, that I'm a bit obsessed with. And I think it's more than just the video game that is Monster Hunter World, it's its game design. With its release on PC less than a month away, and a whole new audience about to be exposed to the world of Monster Hunter, I wanted to sit down and talk a little bit more on some of the things that I think make Monster Hunter such an incredible video game. Now, if you haven't already seen my initial review as a new player, I strongly recommend you check that out, especially if you're going to be a new player yourself. It touches on all of the points that makes Monster Hunter World, from an initial perspective, such an amazing video game. I'll have that video linked down in the pinned comment as well as the description, and then if you want to come on back here, I'm really just going to be building an extension of that discussion today, further expanding my thoughts on why I enjoy Monster Hunter World so much, and in turn using that as evidence for why I think everyone should at least try Monster Hunter World. This is the type of game that could just be sitting there, lurking, just waiting to be your next great video game experience, whether you play it alone or with friends, whether you play it hardcore or casual. And that's really just some of the small things we're going to talk about today that make Monster Hunter World one of the best video games I've ever played. So let's actually start by talking about World's core gameplay loop and how that influences pretty much everything else you do in Monster Hunter, because I think it's that obsession, that focus for the core gameplay loop and how it influences the experience as a whole that sets Monster Hunter apart from other shared world experiences. Specifically, a lot of the shared world shooters we see on the market today, like Warframe, Division, Destiny. When it comes to Monster Hunter, everything revolves around that core gameplay loop because in essence that core gameplay loop is the entire experience. In Monster Hunter, you pick one of many weapon archetypes and then you learn how to use it and then you go hunt big monsters. Occasionally you hunt small monsters, you explore the open world, and that's something that I think World has definitely done better than other Monster Hunter experiences, at least just based on my research and study of past Monster Hunter experiences. But at the end of the day, that's just extra, right? That's extra to bring the world to life. It's extra stuff to improve the presentation, the atmosphere of Monster Hunter World as a Monster Hunter game. It all still comes back to that basic act of killing giant monsters. I mean, that's what you do in Monster Hunter again and again and again and again. And fortunately, if you can find yourself enjoying Monster Hunter's combat with one of the many weapon archetypes, that is a really satisfying core gameplay loop. And I think that's one of the big things that continues to hold on to me now that I've passed the 100-hour mark on Monster Hunter World with 2 characters that have made their way all the way through the initial low-level experience, and I'm now diving deep into the endgame stuff, the high-rank stuff, is that this is just a really fun game to play on a moment-to-moment basis. Like, the combat doesn't get boring. Fighting monsters doesn't get boring. And there's this wonderful sense of progression as you go from monster to monster, and the difficulty increases, and the monsters, you know, continue to be diverse and have their own tactics, their own weaknesses, their own styles, their own designs. It is an experience that you can just play in any number of ways, and you're always going to enjoy it. And I think, again, that all sort of folds back in on how well executed that core gameplay loop is. You know, getting prepped for fights, the fights themselves, the aftermath of the fights. I played Monster Hunter World pretty casually. You know, I'm not like somebody who puts in 10, 20 hours a week. I know there are people who are die-hard into that stuff, and it's still just as enjoyable. And I think that's something that concerns a lot of people with these shared world games, is they feel like they're not going to get the entire experience if they can't put in this obsessive amount of time. And that's exactly how some games actually design themselves. And I think that's a problem we see with a lot of these shared world shooters, is they're so obsessed with adding actual filler, not grind, but filler to the experience to sort of to give in to the people who just seem to be ravenous in wanting content. These people who seriously do put in 1,000 hours and want 1,000 hours more because they're just putting in so much time for the game. You know, the rest of us could sit there and play casually, and we're never even going to touch the endgame content. And that leaves us in a position with many of these games where we don't get to enjoy the best bits of the game because they save that stuff for the endgame. You know, when you boot up a game like Destiny, this is a huge flaw that I've that I've always had with Destiny, Destiny 1, Destiny 2, it doesn't really matter what expansion, is that the process of getting from the beginning to the end game isn't really enjoyable within itself. And a lot of people who play Destiny are just like, well, that's kind of the point, it's all about the end game. Monster Hunter doesn't do that though. So if you're frustrated with that sort of design ideology, Monster Hunter doesn't do that. Monster Hunter is a game you can sit down and you can spend 3 months getting through low rank, 3 months making it through the base story, making your way into high rank and end game. It may take you 30-40 hours depending on how much you explore. And that's the beauty of it. You can spend as much time doing it as you want. You can farm the Anjanath and get all the Anjanath armor. Then you can go out and farm the Raytheon, the Rathalos. You can go back and do the Jagras. You can do whatever you want. You can take your time and just experience it. And that whole process never once feels like it's lacking because you're not in the end game. That is one of Monster Hunter World's greatest strengths. It is the thing that, even though it doesn't fit into the shooter genre of the shared world games, blows those games away in my opinion. It's the thing that made my first-hand experience with Monster Hunter World as a new Monster Hunter player such an incredible one. That's the hook for me, was like, I don't feel rushed. What's the point? I know there's cool stuff at high rank. I know there's additional layers of depth, additional mechanics that I'm going to unlock, but I'm having fun right here, right now, because that core gameplay system, that core loop we talked about, that's there from hour 0 to hour 100. It gets new things added into it. It gets additional layers, as I was just saying, but that meat, that core of fighting monsters and exploring the worlds and collecting resources to craft components, to prep for the fights, it's always there. That is an exceptional piece of game design. And that is, I think, the thing that drives me the most to recommend Monster Hunter World to other games, to buy a copy of the game for my buddy for his birthday so he could get knee deep in it with me, is just knowing that this game is always focused on the moment-to-moment player interactions and ensuring that those are fun. Monster Hunter World is a game that is filled with exceptionally little filler. It feels like there's almost no filler. Everything you do has a purpose, and that purpose is almost always tied back into the act of hunting monsters, which is in itself just an inherently really fun thing to do. Investigations, bounties, those are the only moments where the game ever feels like it's asking you to just go out and like do things that are a little bit more low-key, but those come across as enjoyable moments of, sort of taking a break. Like, oh man, fighting monsters is stressful. Sometimes I just want to go out. I want to explore on expedition with some friends. I want to gather some resources, complete some bounties, maybe do some small monster investigations, get some additional resources. And again, it all ties back in to the reward system for the game. This is another area in which Monster Hunter World, Monster Hunter, this is something Monster Hunter has been doing since the dawn of time, really drives home how it handles loot better than any other experience. All of these other games, they want you to kill stuff as a way to just kind of get to a point where you then kill something else and maybe have a chance to get the thing that you wanted, right? In a lot of instances, you don't even have to kill the things. This is one of the problems I've had with Warframe, is like you can sometimes just run past the enemies and then complete the one objective. There's not this constant focus on ensuring that every second is made up of enjoyable gameplay. Monster Hunter does that and then ensures that your path to unlocking any reward that you want in the game is very clear. There is RNG in Monster Hunter, but understanding that if you want Anjanath armor means all you have to do is fight the Anjanath is a pretty outstanding feeling when compared to other games which might have one weapon that you want existing in 5 different loot pools across the entire experience. Monster Hunter never does that. The randomness is there, but it never makes you guess as to how you're going to gain access to armor for Legiana, for armor for the Rathalos. You just go kill those things. Oh, you need a component from the Baroth to make this next lance? Okay, well, let's go hunt the Baroth. It is, again, just one of those, seemingly a side effect, but it's a part of that core design ideology behind Monster Hunter is a game all about hunting monsters. It's incredible how that statement, which comes across, I think, to the unexperienced as a potential weakness for Monster Hunter, is its greatest strength. That idea that this is a game about just hunting monsters. But that is really just at the core. And then it's all these other bits and pieces of connective tissue that make this one huge, perfectly cooked chunk of meat. You Monster Hunter fans will appreciate that reference, I think. So really, if you're looking to play hardcore, to dive in with friends or alone for hundreds of hours, 30, 10, 20 hours a week maybe you play, you can absolutely do that. If you're someone who puts in a couple hours, you know, maybe 2-3 times a week with some friends, you can do that and you'll always enjoy the experience. I've got now across 2 characters about 100 hours in Monster Hunter. I'm just now diving into the high rank stuff, and my experience has been unbelievably enjoyable. And more importantly, I'm impressed with how much I feel I've done in what has actually been a relatively small amount of time in comparison to other shared world experiences, where I know I put hundreds of hours into these games because they are filled with so much filler, so much meaningless content that doesn't draw back to that basic value of ensuring the player is constantly enjoying the core gameplay loop. Far too many of these shared world games are executing on that ideology of filler to expand the content and not really being able to just focus on the quality of the content. So my 100 hours in Monster Hunter has come across as feeling like a much more expansive, a much more time-consuming experience than any of those games have, while having actually consumed far less time. It's not necessarily me poking fun at those other shared world games, but I think it says a lot about the different audiences for these games, and the fact that Monster Hunter fans don't necessarily feel the need for a game to have 3,000 hours of content so they can burn through it as quickly as possible. They're more than happy to have a few hundred hours, maybe 1,000 hours of content, with new content always coming on the way in form of monster fights, and have it be a little bit more quality. This is very much a case where quality over quantity is a clear demonstration of the Monster Hunter experience. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you're going to be diving into Monster Hunter, or considering to dive into Monster Hunter, whether it's on console or on PC when it releases in August, I really strongly recommend you give the game a chance. I think the biggest barrier for entry for most people isn't the learning process and having to go to the wiki to figure things out. This is also a game you can just kind of play and discover and you'll still do all right. I think it really is the combat. You're either going to enjoy the combat, you're going to put in the time to find a weapon archetype that you enjoy, or you're just going to give up very early on. My advice for you, if you pick Monster Hunter up, is to try all of the weapons in training mode, and then to not be afraid to go out and fight some of the early game monster fights, and then switch weapons. This is an easy game early on to swap weapons before you start investing in their upgrade and crafting trees, and to find the weapon that best suits you. If you have any other questions for me in regard to Monster Hunter World, feel free to leave them down in the comment section below, and I will see you in the next one.
You have been brought here for a purpose, the most important task of your lives.